Dodge this.
One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of DTRH. It is October 3rd, 2014. 10/3/2014. It's the Friday edition of DTRH. Little change of pace tonight. I'm not going to be getting into Ebola. I'm not going to be getting into possible World War III in Syria. We're starting with just bombing Syria. I've been covering that all week. I don't think you need 4 shows of me going off on the same topics in the same week. So since it's Friday, we're going to change the pace a little bit. Woodsheddings galore, no doubt, tonight, but we're going to change the topic of discussion. Now, what could I want to talk about possibly tonight? What could possibly have irritated me during the course of the day today that when I heard it, I instantly decided, and I mean instantly decided, what tonight's broadcast was going to be about? What could that be? It was the anti-cannabis commercial I heard on the AM talk radio where I live. I was driving around doing some stuff today, taking care of some things on the home front, and there's nothing much to listen to around here. And unfortunately, the TuneIn app, at least with my phone, I don't know if anybody else has been having problems with it, but with my smartphone, the TuneIn app freezes my whole phone up for whatever reason. I don't know, and it's not just my phone because I've had the phone replaced. So it's the app itself. I don't know if it's just the app or if it's the the app versus my phone. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't work right. So I haven't been tuning into TFR that way. I've been calling the Listen Live on my phone and tuning in that way. And I was in a vehicle today where I didn't have, I would have had to keep the thing on speaker, and with the windows cracked and no AC in Florida, it gets really hot. So I had the windows rolled down, and you can't hear anything on the phone. So I was forced to listen to the AM in the vehicle I was in for a while today. So anyway, I'm chugging right along, cruising down the highway, and what do I hear? I hear fear-mongering on the radio. Now, I know how it works, and especially doing radio, you can tear apart like edits and 30-second spots, 60-second spots, just everything. It's like doing editing or anything else. You can start to pick things apart, and you can start to figure out this, that, the other thing. Well, the whole commercial is just fear for fear, 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 for fear, fear, fear. It's all fear porn. So I decided that I'm going to talk about cannabis. Again, I've talked about it 1,000 times. I haven't really talked about it in a while here. There was a period of time where I focused on it for about 3 weeks straight. I had all, the Canna Moms on. I had all these different people on. I played different audio clips, and it's been a while. And since it's October and next month, wow, it flew by right quick, didn't it? It's already October 3rd, and in exactly 1 month, the Florida voters will be deciding about cannabis, medical cannabis here. And the no on two crowd is out there hard. They are, it's yes on two to pass it. Vote yes on Amendment 2. It'd be an amendment to the state constitution. Bam! Medical cannabis. Yeah. The anti-cannabis crowd doesn't like that. They're coming out with reefer madness style anti-cannabis propaganda. So tonight, I'm going to woodshed it and rip it apart and debunk it. And then I'm going to, for the people who maybe are on the fence, still aren't sure about if they back medical cannabis. I know most people that tune into this radio broadcast understand the medicinal benefits and everything. But perhaps you're a newer listener. Perhaps maybe you've been around for a long time, but you're still kind of on the fence. I don't expect that everybody that tunes in to listen to the show agrees with what I say 100% or the things that I present 100%. Therefore, I would like to present the factual information to you again. So I'm going to present to you some information that shows you the opposite side of the coin. Now, if you want to go listen to the interviews with the Canna Moms, you can go to my archives, and they're all there. They're all from this year, from 2014. You can listen to how they're all taking care of their sick kids. And this is part of the reason that this commercial pissed me off, which I'm going to play the commercials for you. It attacks caregivers and calls them drug dealers. It equates caregivers to drug dealers. This is the last month of what's going on. And I think this thing's been out for like maybe a week. So you got a little over a month before the and even if it's been out for longer than that, say it's been out for 2 months already, this ad, because some of these spots just popped up recently. So we'll say it's maybe 2 months. Let's see, I found it actually on YouTube. So let's see if I can find the upload date here. Actually, isn't it? Yeah, no, I was correct. It was just uploaded like 4 days ago. So there's a couple of them that were just uploaded 3-4 days ago, and it's all. There's one I'm going to play for you. It's called "The Devil Is in the Details." Another one's called "It's a Trick." I'm gonna play the anti-cannabis propaganda for you so you can hear it yourself, and then I'll of course woodshed it. But I decided to cover this because I was driving down the road, and as I'm driving doing this stuff, I have the AM on, and I think Rush was on at the time. And as he's playing in the background, and I was already nitpicking things he was saying and arguing, at the radio, as dissecting things out loud, and on, of course, it's Rush's audience, the super conservative audience, and on comes this commercial. And it's just blatant. It's just, the propaganda is ridiculous. I mean, it's not what it seems. They should call it what did they say? Well, you'll hear it in a commercial. They should call it the Drug Dealer Enabling Act, or the Drug Dealer Protection Act. That's what they said. They said it should be called the Drug Dealer Protection Act instead of Amendment 2. Just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Okay? Just stupidest crap I think I've ever heard or seen. But again, it's Reefer Madness 2014 here in Florida. It's the last ditch effort of the anti-cannabis crowd to keep it illegal. Remember, if they're trying this hard to dispute real fact, if they're trying this hard to to sit and scare you, because that's the only argument they have. They don't have anything else other than fear for fear, 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 fear for fear, 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 right? If that's all they have, if there's no logic, it might come off to the uneducated or the unenlightened as logical what they're saying. But if you listen to it, it's all fear-based. Your kids are going to get their hands on pot. Oh my, it's all about the kids. The kids are going to get the drugs. Oh my God, now kids will be able to get access to drugs. Caregivers aren't really caregivers. They can be anybody. Oh my God. So what you're telling me is doctors are just going to randomly start prescribing medical cannabis to patients who are like 14, 12, 13, 14 years old, 15 years old. They just roll in the doc. Yo, doc, I need pot because I don't feel good. Sure, Johnny, here's your prescription for marijuana, the devil's juice. Go get some. Don't get yourself addicted to heroin while you're at it, because we all know it's a gateway drug, little Johnny, so you be careful now. Thanks, doc. I mean, really? You'll hear it. Your kid can get access to weed without your consent. This is all, and then you hear the sheriffs, you'll hear it. This is all just to make money for drug dealers. No. Your opposition to it is so you can make money, sheriff. Why don't you stop projecting your reasons for protecting the prohibition of cannabis? And it's not even recreational that they're making it legal. They just want to make it legal for medicinal use. No, not here in the state of Florida. God forbid. God forbid what? That sick kids don't have to be sick anymore? Or perhaps have a chance? Ooh, God forbid. Let me play this, because you know what? I'll just keep ranting, and it'll be 2 hours of me ranting without me ripping into their crap, which is entertaining, by itself, but still. Let me play their crap. So let's start with the not what it seems one. This is the one that I heard today that pissed me off and started this whole thing.
Amendment 2 isn't what it seems. Its caregiver provision gives legal protection to marijuana dealers. Even felons and drug dealers could be caregivers. Amendment 2 caregivers don't need background checks or medical training.
So, wait a minute. You're going to tell me that a caregiver, one of these, a mother, Renee Petro, Mariah Barnhart, two of the Canna moms, they both have sick kids. They're caregivers for their children. Why should they need a background check to give their own child cannabis? But why do you need a background check? Because the drug dealers out there, that's what's going to happen. The drug dealers are going to pretend that they're caregivers. So you're equating the Canna moms and people like them who are caregivers for sick children, sick family members, sick loved ones, whatever. They need to have background checks? What about guys with sick wives or wives with sick husbands? They need to have background checks to take care of their spouse? You're insane. Who are you people? Who do you think you are? How about we have a background check on every one of you politicians, legislators, and sheriffs? And I mean a detailed background check. I don't mean, running it through NCIS, or excuse me, NCIC. I mean running it through, I don't know, one of these hardcore private investigative companies that do thorough background checks, the thorough vetting. Why don't we run it through some of the same companies that vet politicians, find out if they have any dirty secrets hidden in the closet? How about them? Except they have to make everything they find public. How about we run all of you on background checks before you're allowed to have guns and badges and exert your tyrannical authority the way you do? How about that? Oh, you don't like that, do you? What's more dangerous? What's a more realistic danger? You. Anyway, let's get back to we have another 15 seconds. No background checks and no medical training. Why should these mothers or anybody have to get specialized medical training when they're obviously the ones already that know how to use medical cannabis properly? It's not like it's really hard. You can't overdose on it. Okay, but well, you could have too much in your system. Well, maybe you get really high and fall asleep. You can't die from it. Your body just stops absorbing cannabinoids after a certain period of time. It's like the old expression, you can only get so high. Well, there's actually a little truth to that. Receptors only take in a certain amount. Go look it up. I've talked about this before, but oh my God. Its vicious arms are wrapped around your children. The devil's vice, marijuana. Anyway, let's get back to the not what it seems commercial. This is like I said, this is the one that pissed me off and set me off on this today.
So what looks like a safeguard is really a loophole. Amendment 2 caregivers can't be arrested or sued if their pot hurts someone. They don't.
If their pot hurts someone, okay, say they're, now what they're referring to as caregivers in the commercial, see how they're merging two things. They're merging things together. Okay. First of all, people that are taking care of their sick loved ones technically are caregivers. Okay, and they would be, of course, yes. Okay, like in Renee or Mo's case, they'd be able to, as the caregiver of the parent of the child. Obviously, Brandon's not going to go drive himself over. He's a kid anyway, but he's not going to go drive himself over, right? Dahlia's not going to. She's a little girl. She's not going to drive herself over. So their parents would have to go. Their mothers would have to get it for them. So they'd be caregivers. Now they're talking about the dispensaries. Well, anybody could be a dispensary. That crackhead guy down the street can be a dispensary. We already know that through your legislative process, even though the Charlotte's Web bill thing was passed, right? I watched the hearings about how they're gonna, like, who's gonna be the nurseries and everything else. We already know how Amendment 2 is gonna be once it passes. They're only gonna allow certain people to be nurseries, and they're only gonna allow probably certain people to have dispensaries and all this other stuff. The way they're making it sound like is if Amendment 2 passes, like come November 5, all hell is going to break loose, fire is going to shoot up, and suddenly every kid in the state of Florida is going to be smoking crack.
Call it the Drug Dealer Protection Act, but they should. Vote no on Amendment 2.
They don't call it the Drug Dealer Protection Act, but they should. I could think of a group of nifty slogans for our government too. They don't call it greedy sheriffs who just want drug money from the government. But they should. Right? That's what you get. I'm against it because I'm worried about the safeguard of my community. Bullshit. I'm sorry, I had something caught in my throat, Sheriff. It's all about the drug seizure money and the money you get from the feds. Plus, I'm sure somebody on the back end greasing the skids to make sure that you stay with no. But even if they're not, even if it's just the money you get from drug seizures alone and the money you get from the feds for having a certain amount of drug arrests each year, you know why? Because arresting somebody for smoking a joint is certainly a lot easier than arresting somebody with a kilo of coke. Because the person with the coke's probably going to fire at you and shoot at you, maybe try to protect that kilo of coke. Maybe not. Maybe they'll just give up. Maybe the person all jacked up on coke might be more apt to fight you. Whereas the person on cannabis is mellow and chill and, oh man, that sucks, and I don't want to get arrested or whatnot. Some people fight, but more often than not, at least from what I've seen, no. Cannabis doesn't make people go do stupid things. People choose to do stupid things. The cannabis doesn't make them do anything stupid. Okay, and usually if they do something dumb and they have cannabis in their system, they also have like meth, beer, all sorts of prescription drugs. But I'm sure the prescription drugs had nothing to do with it, right? They never have anything to do with it. Those things kill more people than street drugs do each year. Fact. But don't worry about that. That's nothing. Those drug dealers are permitted. The ones that say pharmacist, that are corporate owned, and they have to deal with Big Pharma and make Big Pharma tons of money because Big Pharma is feeding them the pills to dispense to you. Yeah. That's all okay. That's all okay. So, vote yes on 2. Next month, vote yes on 2. Make medical cannabis here in the state of Florida legal. Stick your boot in Tyranny's face. Instead of having the boot on your face, knock the boot off, stand up, and put your boot on Tyranny's face for once. You really, really think that if you don't allow people to have access to medical cannabis, that they're not going to use cannabis? That's another one of the things. You're going to have pot all throughout your neighborhoods. Newsflash, you already have pot all throughout your neighborhoods. Would you rather have people being a little bit more open and honest about it, or would you rather have everybody running around doing it behind your back? Newsflash, I would say probably 8 out of 10 people smoke or have smoked at one point in their life. I know a few people that haven't, and those are the uneducated, ignorant people that don't know anything what they're talking about when they talk about it. And they say things like, oh my God, that stuff, that's a gateway drug, blah, 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 blah. You obviously know nothing of what you speak. Did you ever do it? No. Right. So that's like somebody never driving a car, but criticizing you on how you operate the vehicle. And I don't mean if you're driving like Mario Andretti and, weaving in and out of lanes and things like that, driving like an idiot. But that'd be like someone who's never driven a car ever telling you, I don't think you're operating your car properly. I don't think you're doing this properly. Have you ever driven a car? No. Then shut up. If you've never had that experience, if you don't know what it is, then the only thing you speak from is not from personal experience, but from someone telling you. And I'm sorry, in this aspect, when you're wrong, you're wrong. Cannabis doesn't make you go eat people's faces. Doesn't make you a mass murderer. Cannabis isn't going to make you go kill somebody. It's not going to make someone in your neighborhood go kill somebody. And if you have a kid and you're worried about your kid getting access to cannabis, well, Papa, I don't want my kid getting access to it. Then be a good parent. How about that? Well, it's not easy for me to be there all the time. How do I? Well, you know what? Your kid could get access to pills just as easily, probably even easier. Your kid could get access to a lot of bad things. That's called life. It's your job as a parent to instill in that child a little bit of common sense and some brain power. If you don't, then it's your bad. And if something happens to your child, don't go blaming society and everybody else because your kid got hurt. You should first look in the friggin' mirror. Because that's where it all starts. I was a little hellion when I was a kid. But I knew where my limits were. My mother, we didn't have cell phones when I was a kid. Beepers just came out by the time I was like a late teenager. Back then, if you had a pager, you were a drug dealer. I remember that. Oh, your kid must be a drug dealer because he's got a beeper. Ugh, my mother had to explain to the school but numerous times that her and my father were divorced. She used the pagers to keep track of my brother and I. But I digress. So I'd be in the middle of doing something that I shouldn't be doing with my friends, and the beeper would go off. And it would be my mother's phone number with 911, which meant call her ASAP. So I'd go find a payphone or one of my friend's house's phones, and I'd call her and be like, what's up, Mom? And you know what she would say to me? I don't know what you're doing right now, but I know you're up to something, and you better knock it off. And every time, she was right. She didn't have spies hiding in the trees following me. My mother had what most mothers have, mother's intuition. She knew when I was doing something wrong, and she would whoop my rear end when I was doing it. If she caught me, and usually even if she didn't catch me doing it, when I would come home, she'd be like, I know you did something. She just knew. There was no getting around. Even if I lied to her and hid it from her, she found out days later, did not matter. You know why? My mother knew her 2 sons. That's why. No, my mother was not a perfect parent. Nobody is. Get over it. But she knew when I was up to something. She knew that her kids were capable of things. When she heard that something bad had happened in town, she didn't say, oh, I know my sons didn't do that. She would be like, oh, God, I hope they weren't involved. Now, it sounds kind of funny, but it's true. Okay? So my mother, again, she knew when I was up to no good. She knew when I was being bad. So look, let's get it straight. If you're really worried about your kids getting their hands on weed, well, your kids can get their hands on weed easy now. This isn't going to change the fact that there's going to be people that still sell weed behind the scenes, because there's still people that smoke specifically just for recreational use, and they can't get it legally yet. So if you think that just by voting yes on 2, suddenly there's going to be pot all over the place where it's not now. You're sorely mistaken. That's the same mentality that people think that when they're surprised that, oh my God, there's concealed weapons in the United States. I would not want to live in that state. Psst, every state has concealed weapons in it. Guess what? I ran into somebody probably about 2 years ago now, 2.5 years ago maybe, down here in Florida, and I was having a conversation with them, and we were talking, and they brought up, guns, and they were like, oh, I don't think people should be allowed to concealed carry, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, you realize that people carry in the state of Florida. Oh, that's just few and far between, a few crazies. I said, no, more than half the population of the state has concealed weapons permits. The state of Florida released those statistics a couple years ago. More than half the population of the state has concealed weapons permits, or at the time had applied for them. Or I think those were the ones that they had handed out, was over half the state. Enough people to like half the state. And I'm sure some people might live out of state, for a couple months out of the year. But the point is, about at least half the people, at least half of the state of Florida has concealed weapons permits. So if you're out at the mall, if you want to do just easy round numbers, that's like 50-50. So if there's 100 people, 50 of them have guns. Are they running around shooting each other in the mall? No. Common sense, a little bit of thought. Wow, look at that. Mankind can be trusted. See, what these cops are telling you is you can't be trusted as a parent because obviously you can't control your child. So everybody else has to suffer because your child can't be controlled because you're a bad parent. That's what they're saying. When they say that if this bill is passed, all the kids will be smoking crack. What, nobody's parents can like stop anything their kids from, doing something, or can maybe be a good parent? Oh, astonishing concept. Just saying. Don't buy into the fear, ladies and gentlemen. The plant isn't a big bad Frankenstein's monster. It's not ISIS. Stupid. That propaganda is ridiculous. Yes on 2 next month will be a vote for true freedom, ladies and gentlemen. You want to put your boot in tyranny's face? Here's a start. Are you tired of seeing the little guy get kicked in the face? I know I am. You tired of seeing sick kids? I know I am. You tired of seeing sick adults who can't have access to medication? Because the DEA has to come in and they have to tell you how to do everything. And oh my God, well, we know everything. They constantly torture pain patients with the way they do things. People end up committing suicide. Cannabis is the answer all around to so many different ailments. It's not the devil's weed. And right now, we're actually joined by a special guest for a few minutes, good friend of mine, who happened to be tuned in tonight listening to the broadcast, another radio show host here on the network, my good friend Nathan Fraser, and he can offer some perspective to you people who might be on the fence about voting here in Florida, or if you're elsewhere in the country and your state has something coming up, or there's people trying to push for it in the future, and you're still on the fence. Nathan is in Colorado, and he can offer a perspective about whether or not the pits of hell have opened up and swallowed people, and if people have turned into zombies and there's murder all over the place, or if it's not like that and it's all propaganda. So let's welcome to the broadcast my good friend Nathan Fraser. Nathan, welcome back, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Like you were saying, I was just tuning into the show, and I wanted to call in and offer a little bit of perspective because we're here in Colorado, we're a couple of years further down the road than a lot of states are right now. And those commercials you were playing, man, they were just intensely melodramatic. And I just kind of wanted to offer maybe a balance to the conversation.
Well, first of all, what do you think? I mean, do you think it's like Reefer Madness 2014?
No, actually, it's not surprising to me because we have previous examples like Portugal. I think a decade ago, actually probably about 13 years ago now, decriminalized all drugs, and they watched drug use and drug abuse just plummet. And the same thing has been happening here in Colorado since we legalized marijuana. Marijuana use is down. And especially the one thing that they were really worried about was teen use of marijuana. And actually, now that there's no rebellious nature, there's nothing, it's not like a taboo thing to smoke marijuana anymore. Teen use of marijuana actually is consistently dropping. I think every single month that they release a study, every single time that they've come out with new numbers, every single time the numbers have gone down on the amount of teen use of marijuana as well.
Yeah, dude, you want teens to not do something? Have everybody do it, including their parents, and then they'll stop.
And that's what it really comes down to, is a lot of the people that smoke marijuana, and this is what's really strange, is we've gone just straight, we haven't decriminalized it, which is what I wish we would do. I wish they would just say, you know what, it's just a plant. Anybody who wants to grow it can grow it. Anybody who wants to sell it can sell it. Anybody who wants to consume it can consume it. And we're going to stay out of your business. That's what I wish they would do. But they legalized it and they regulate it like alcohol, which means that there's obviously going to be big businesses sprung up around it, and there's going to be regulatory capture, and they're going to be lobbying the government for permissions and all kinds of crap that goes along with all that. But when you go into the dispensaries here, you see average everyday Joes. You see people in business suits walking in and buying marijuana next to people in Slayer t-shirts. And I am not exaggerating at all. I have a friend that works at one of the dispensaries here in town, the first one to actually sell legally, not just to medical patients, but to anybody. And district attorneys go in there, lawyers go in there, even judges go in there and buy marijuana. So and I guarantee it's not just because it's legal. I guarantee these people were smoking it beforehand and at the same time throwing people behind bars for doing the exact same thing that they were doing. But when it really comes out, it's all kinds of successful people are smoking marijuana, and that's kind of like, for kids, it's not very hip. When you see like authority figures and your parents and everybody that does this, and you're just like, well, there's nothing rebellious about that. But keeping it taboo, keeping it illegal, I think is probably the worst thing that you can do if you want to stop children from being enticed by it.
Of course, don't make it. If they make it taboo, like to do it, then all of a sudden it becomes cool for them to do it because now it's bucking the system, man. We were all teenagers at one point. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out how to deal with teenagers properly. We just don't. It's like they figure out how to do it and what not to do, Nathan, and then they turn around and they go with the what not to do. They take that and run with that as their playbook.
Yeah, I think you hit on something, though, that a lot of people don't really want to hit on, and that's the incentives for keeping it illegal. Cartels want it to stay illegal because it's huge business for them. The police unions want it to stay illegal because it's an excuse to have tanks rolling out on the street and all kinds of canine units. The prison industrial complex wants it to remain illegal because they want to keep their prisons filled, and the majority of people in prison right now are marijuana users. And judges, without the war on drugs and the war on terror, people will start to realize how irrelevant and unnecessary government is. So by legalizing marijuana, that's about 80% of the war on drugs is directed exactly
the whole recovery industry, dude. Like, who do you see? Like, look at the people that come out. This is the easy way to figure out why someone's against it, is by looking at who's against it. Okay, try to figure out what their motivations would be. It's all like you said. It's judges, police unions, and not even most cops, because cops themselves you talk to on the beat, they're like, dude, arresting people for marijuana is really retarded. Not many of them. You still will find some that are for it, but many of them are like, no, it's dumb. So it's the unions, it's the higher ups, right? Of course, the federal government, and the private prison industrial complex. But these like therapy doctors, like Dr. Drew type doctors, when they talk, they see, he's like, oh, cannabis is bad. It needs to add the drugs, baby. No, you know what? You wouldn't even exist if it weren't for the war on drugs. You are so irrelevant to begin with. And I know some people are out there going to be like, well, you know, I used to be a junkie Popeye and I got through it, or I was an addict and I got through it, and blah, blah. Okay, maybe once in a while there are therapists out there who were former addicts themselves that helped you get through something. But at the end of the day, you got yourself through that. Because the person addicted to those drugs, I've had that in my own personal life with someone that is close to me that was addicted to drugs for a while. Okay, that person has to make the decision to do it. Nobody made you do it. So Dr. Drew didn't save you. None of these, I know people that have gone through these rehab programs and they're like, dude, that stuff they've been through it 3, 4, 5 times and it didn't help them. What helped them was when they addressed the problem that caused them to do the drugs to begin with, because the drugs isn't the problem. It's a symptom of a bigger problem. That's the problem. They don't address the symptom that causes they don't address the problem that causes the symptom, which is the people doing the drugs. They address the drugs because that's where the money's at, making it illegal and going after it and flexing our muscles and everything else. I mean, none of those rehabs, dude, would be they wouldn't exist if it weren't for the war on drugs. I mean, maybe you'd have lower level if people wanted to get off the stuff because they were doing it too much and they were physically addicted. Fine, but you know what I mean. I mean, there's an entire almost like small economy based off of the war on drugs and things like cannabis being illegal.
Yeah, and I guess a couple of the positive things that have happened in Colorado, number one, people aren't being stuck in cage for a peaceful crime that hurts nobody, so that's awesome. Number two, the illegal activity that's directly tied to marijuana has become non-existent now. There's no like cartel reason to have marijuana. For a while, we were having a lot of marijuana that was coming in from Mexico, like the lower grade stuff. And we had a competition that was going on for many, many years between people that would grow it locally and people that would smuggle it in. And there was murders, there was all kinds of violence, there was all kinds of other crime that would get tied into marijuana because it was very profitable. And that meant that people that were willing to break laws to make money, who were also willing to break more serious laws, were attracted to the marijuana industry. And now that now that there's not that incentive there, now that you can't make the huge profits that you could make when it was illegal, the cartels have pretty much just up and disappeared. And I think I was just reading, a month or 2 months ago, there's been a 50% violent crime drop in Denver, Denver's our capital, so it's one of the more violent cities. Since last year, or since the beginning of this year when they decriminalized it, a 50% drop in violent crime. And I'm not saying it's completely attributed to marijuana, but I am saying a lot of the people that were bringing the violence to Colorado because of the marijuana trade have just up and left, and there's no incentive for them to be here anymore.
Yeah, there's no incentive to be violent anymore because they can go down to the street corner and get it. They don't have to go, to the local guy, all shady, quiet like, and maybe he's the only guy in 5 miles that has it or sells it. And it takes the shadiness right out of it. And then you can see, perfect example, Colorado didn't get swallowed up. People are okay. The crime rate's going down. So the reality in Colorado is a complete 180-degree contradiction of what they're saying here and trying to scare people in Florida. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and so that would be my question to you is, are people in Florida not able to see what's going on in Colorado? Are you guys lied to about what's going on in Colorado? It seems like with the internet now, just hearing one of those commercials and then going and double checking to see what's happened in states that they've already legalized in, it would seem that those commercials would have no effect whatsoever on an actual rational thinking individual.
The only people I honestly see at this point, honestly buying into it, are the people that are either on the fence or that wouldn't have voted yes on 2 anyway. The one that's who they're trying to go for is the on the fence voters, because the yes on 2 campaign for medical cannabis has way more votes than the no campaign. And I mean, it only needs 60% to pass, and it's got way more than 60%.
Yeah. And see, the thing, there's a whole bunch of different aspects to it. I think one of the most interesting things right now, Colorado was one of the first states to legalize for medical use. And then we obviously, at the same time as Washington, we became the first state or one of the first two states to legalize for recreational use. But I figured I'd never thought I'd actually see the day where you'd be able to legally buy marijuana in a shop the way that you can now. But I thought that if there was ever going to be something that made Texas actually secede from the nation, it would be like the nation saying, well, we're going to legalize marijuana, and Texas being like, oh no, now we're going to actually secede. But I just saw a story like 2 weeks ago saying that the legalization movement in Texas is one of the strongest ones in the nation now. So even in Texas, where they've been super, super anti-marijuana for decades and decades, even in Texas, they're starting to see the error of their drug war ways. And I don't know, man. I'm hopeful. It's one less thing to fill the prisons with. And even though I don't like using the government I don't believe in using voting to achieve freedom. I'm all for people taking part in voting less power or voting to take power away from the government to stick them in shackles and cages.
It amazes me. I see people that are all about freedom. We need smaller government. It's faux conservatives. It's only because Obama's in office. If it was a Republican, a quote unquote Republican doing the same thing, they wouldn't care. It's just because it's a Democrat and it's Obama. Some of these people, they just amaze me. And they're like, we don't need a police state. You can't take my guns. Screw the government. I wouldn't give up my freedom. But I want you to go put on those same SWAT gear and go down the street to that guy that's peacefully smoking that joint in his house and kick his door and kill everyone and take that joint because it supports terrorism.
Right. And the thing that they don't realize is it's a property rights issue, first of all. I mean, it's a plant and I own that plant. Therefore, it's my property. And you don't have the right to tell me what kind of property I can have, especially if I'm not endangering anybody else by owning it. But not just that, like you mentioned, the kicking down of doors, the bringing the dog out and having the dog circle cars and rummaging through people's cars. It's all complete violations of property rights. And conservatives are supposed to be the ones that stick up for property rights. And when it comes to marijuana and other drugs, they're just like, property rights be damned. We don't care about property rights in this instance. And to me, it confuses me because I'm like, don't you realize that what they're doing when they're kicking people's doors in for drugs, when they're arming themselves up like military units, when they're going through all of these routines where they're kicking down doors and throwing in flashbang grenades and running into people's houses with guns blazing, don't you realize that they're just training for when your guns become illegal? And that's usually what makes, at least most of the conservatives that I know, that's what makes them take pause and realize that the drug war is just training ground for when gun prohibition steps up. And they've advocated and cheerleaded the training that will eventually be used against them, they themselves.
All they got to do is switch the name of what they're prohibiting.
Yeah.
It's really simple. They've figured out, it's like plug and play. All they have to do is tell their robots, the guys that kick the doors in, okay, you're not going after a drug dealer. Now we're going after guns because the president has decided that guns are illegal. Or whoever has decided, the government has decided that guns are illegal. So now we're going to go after the guns just like we used to go after the drugs. Are you ready, boys? And then all these conservatives will be like, hey, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But then suddenly that's why like Mark Passio calls it the My Freedom movement, because there's a lot of people that are only involved in it as long as it, whatever they're for freedom as long as it's their freedom. But when it has to be someone else's freedom and maybe they don't agree with that person's opinion, well, F them. Yes. And it's like, dude, you're either all in or you're not. It's like partial circumcision. You can't go halfway. You have to. It's either you're all in or effing forget it. To quote the late Robin Williams. Okay.
What a great analogy.
Well, seriously, I mean, you're either all in or you're not. You can't be all wishy-washy, and I think that's one of the biggest problems. Is as a society, people have been led down to where they're so confused about things that they get people to not know where they lie until the very last minute, and that's when they get them to make like an impulsive decision, even if it comes to voting or whatever. And then it's usually the decision that they later regret. How many people do you know that are like, I wish I didn't vote for Obama? I don't even know why I voted for him. Of course you don't know why you voted for him. You were manipulated.
Yeah. But I will say it is, from where we're at now to compared to where we were at 10 years ago, I think that it's encouraging to me how many people are starting to see the war on drugs for what it is. And I personally, I don't even smoke cigarettes. I do smoke marijuana, but I don't drink. I rarely drink even caffeine. I don't take any prescription drugs whatsoever. I stay away from all the hard stuff that I used to use as a teenager. I pretty much exclusively enjoy marijuana, and that's about it. But I am all in favor of just killing the whole drug war altogether and just saying, you know what, you own yourself. You have the right to do or destroy your body however you want, as long as you don't hurt anybody else, because this whole tanks and SWAT gear and prisons filled with people who didn't hurt anybody, and then they go into prison just a peaceful person that was a drug addict, and they come out hardened killers. This whole thing is just completely destructive for society, and it's not the correct approach. And people are starting to realize that. And what happened here, what's happening in all these different states, and hopefully what we'll see start happening in Florida. I've really got my fingers crossed for you guys. Hopefully you guys will follow the path that a lot of people are starting to become enlightened about how horrible and how just disastrous this drug war has been. And this is just one step in the right direction, but it is a step in the right direction.
I agree. It's a total step in the right direction. I mean, dude, they have people in their 60s and their 70s down here getting addicted to heroin now because they were given these painkillers for years and years and years for arthritis pain and stuff, and it used to be easy. Yes, there were certain doctors that were writing prescriptions, and there were cases where people were getting nailed on like Route 75, going back north, or 95. I mean, I used to drive a tow truck and do impounds with the state police down here. I saw it. So yes, there were times people got nailed with like 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000, Vicodin or oxycodone or whatever the frick they're called, Oxycontin, however you pronounce it, whatever they are. Yes, they would get caught with it. But did that happen every day, all day long? Was every other car filled with that? I don't think so. I think the pill yes, there were a lot of places again doing illegal activity with the pills down here, like as a side business. But those people ended up, there are, just like with any industry, and you'll see it anywhere. And I've seen it down here with other businesses too. There's shady people in all businesses, okay? And then they always make the rest of the, the business, whatever it may be, look bad. But a lot of these doctors that got closed down were legitimate pain clinics. And the reason they wrote so many freaking pain prescriptions was because they were a pain clinic and they had thousands of, clients that would come in. And a lot of them, they were accident victims, whatever. And these people needed legit pain medication and they don't have access to it anymore. So many of them end up blowing their brains out or killing themselves. And the ones that don't, they go get heroin, dude, because they can't get the pills. So what's worse?
And that's actually one thing, before I'm out of here, one thing that I wanted to bring up is in Colorado, prescription drug use has actually seen a decline, whereas in the whole rest of the nation, prescription drug abuse is the number one drug abuse that's out there right now. And since Colorado allowed medical use probably about 5 years ago, I think is when we first started medical, prescription drug use and prescription drug abuse has continually gone down as well. So for me, looking at it, experiencing it, and never thinking that I would actually see it, I think it's one of the best things. And this is my opinion. Even I've stopped smoking marijuana and I've picked it back up again. It's the only drug that I never have a problem stopping. When I don't want to smoke it anymore, I just stop. All the other drugs, it was a battle for me to stop. Marijuana, if I decide I don't want to smoke it, I just go however long without smoking it. And I never think twice about it. And then if I want to pick it back up, I do. But either side of the fence that I've been on, being a recreational user or not, the things that I've seen as a result of decriminalizing and allowing medical marijuana have been nothing but beneficial. And I can't see anybody arguing against it anywhere else in the nation, especially after watching what's happened here.
All they have to do is turn on the TV, and I mean, well, not really, because if you turn on the TV, you won't see. I rephrased that. All you got to do is turn on your computer monitor and go on the internet and look. If you have internet access, there's no excuse why you don't know what's going on. If you only get cable TV and watch Fox News, well, I kind of understand why you think the way you do, because you're keeping yourself in that little bubble, and you're not going to hear. You're not going to hear. I don't hear Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, or any of them coming on. I mean, Rush, of all people, he got his balls busted about painkillers and stuff a couple of years ago. And here, this guy, if he really does have legit pain and he needs medication or whatever, he could use cannabis too. Why aren't you out there with your big mouth? Oh, that's right, because you're that faux conservative and you wouldn't want to piss off your base because you'd be so afraid to piss them off. When at least I would say half of the old conservatives I know down here, if they don't smoke cannabis, they eat edibles that are made by people that make oil. I mean, I've seen it. I know a lady who, she's in her late 50s, and she, let's just say, she's a very good baker, okay? And I know for a fact that she told me, she's like, all the old people I know do this. If they don't want to smoke it because maybe they're getting old, maybe they don't like to be harsh on their lungs, so they'll make brownies or cookies. And I said to her, I was like, "Come on, it's just you, right?" And she's like, "No, everybody I know." So like, everybody thinks that nobody's doing it. Like, one of the No on 2 campaign things is they're like, if Yes on 2 passes, we're going to have pot. And they love calling it pot. You're going to have pot in your neighborhoods. You already have pot in your neighborhoods. I'm sure out of 10 houses, 8 people are smoking. Okay? Or have smoked at one point and have had cannabis in the house. Did anybody's house explode and hell come down your block? No. It's just ridiculous. Nathan, we got about a minute left. Final thoughts?
I just wanted to say, keep up the great work. I'm loving the show tonight, and thanks for letting me come on and bombard your listeners.
Oh, dude, thank you. It's always a pleasure. And we got to get together, and I got to get you back on for a full 2 hours, pick your brain about a bazillion different things, whatever. There's so much to go over. Thanks
Always
again,
a pleasure.
brother.
Thank you.
Later. Ladies and gentlemen, Nathan Fraser. You got to check his broadcast out, his archives. Live Free FM. I think it's livefreefm.com, or just look up Live Free FM and Nathan Fraser on Google. You'll see his website. But he's also here on Truth Frequency. Go check out his radio broadcast. I promise you won't be disappointed. You might even learn a thing or two, which is usually what happens when you tune into the broadcast here on Truth Frequency. Anyway, we're out of time for 3 minutes, and then we're back with hour number 2, so do not go anywhere. Stay tuned. We will be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com. It is October 3rd, 2014. Wow. As I said in the first hour, this year went by a bit fast. I was just talking to a guy the other day, and I said to him, wasn't it just yesterday that everybody was afraid the world was going to end in 2012? And he said, yeah, wow, that was just like yesterday, right? And I said, yeah, and look, it's already the end of 2014. Holy crap. 2 years post-apocalypse. Ooh, we're still here paying taxes. Wow. Taxes and war. One thing that even the quote-unquote end of the world couldn't stop. Interesting. Anyway, back with hour number 2. So, in hour number 1, I started to woodshed some of the commercials down here, and we were joined for a half hour by my good friend Nathan Fraser. That was awesome, by the way. You couldn't get any more live from Colorado than Nathan. He's literally live in Colorado right now. Is there fire engulfing him? No, Popeye, I'm burning! Ah! No, there's not. Are there masked bandits running around? Is it like The Purge? No, it's not. But our police here in Florida would have you believe that. Again, you got to ask yourself, if there are people who are against it, and yes, there are politicians who make stupid comments and say stupid things all the time about cannabis. A lot of them, and there are some of them that might have financial interests or whatnot, but a lot of them, not all of them are in on it, a lot of them just don't know. They're ignorant. They really just don't know, and they buy what they're spoon-fed. But there are a lot more that are starting to learn, because there are people like you who are bringing I can't speak tonight. Bringing it to their, there you go, I got it out, attention. Like when you go to their offices and you sit in their offices with, 10, 15 parents of sick kids, and you expose these politicians to things. And a lot of times, yes, you get them when they're out on the road, but it's really good to go to D.C. if you can and sit in their office if they're there. If not, then get them when they do the town hall meetings. Of course, they don't do town hall meetings too much anymore. Gee, I wonder why. They don't like to be embarrassed. But you have to look at the objection to it. Who's against it? Why? It's a logical fallacy for somebody to assume that because somebody is quote-unquote in charge of a rehab center, that they're the go-to individual in this case. And if they say, because that's what the media does, that they'll say, well, this guy runs rehab and he says that no, you shouldn't legalize medical cannabis. It's bad and it just leads to bigger drugs like heroin and crack and everything else. Really? So you're appealing to his authority, or his supposed authority, as the owner of a rehab facility. Think about that for a minute, because that's what's going on. That's what's really being presented to you. You have to look at the situation and understand it for what it truly is. Don't look at it at face value. Some guy, oh wow, this guy's a rehab specialist. He owns a rehab. He must know. He's even a former addict himself. Wow. Wow, this guy's he knows. He's been there. He knows. I'm sure it was pot that made him go on heroin. Okay, I'm going to vote no on too. Use your common sense for a minute. Understand what logical fallacies are. You know what they are if you're listening to this broadcast. Look at it for what it is. They're getting you, or they're trying to get you, on your emotion. They're appealing to you to look at this guy as an authority figure because he owns or is a rehab counselor. Either he owns a rehab and is a counselor, or is just a rehab counselor. Maybe a former addict himself. And that makes them the moral authority on it. And that's it. It's done. Science be damned. Proof of people using it be damned. The truth of Colorado not falling into Hades be damned. We're just going to break out Reefer Madness 2014 all over again and start trying to scare people. It's dramatic. It's overly dramatic. Here, let's listen to another 30-second radio spot they've been playing. Listen to this one. It's called It's a Trick.
I'm a doctor. This is my prescription pad, and you won't need it to legally buy pot under Amendment 2. Amendment 2 is a trick. It's written to make you think pot will require a prescription, like FDA-approved medications. It won't. Under Amendment 2, marijuana would be sold in pill mill-style pot shops, unapproved and
Pill mill style. That's their favorite thing, is to compare it to the quote-unquote pill mills. I was talking about with Nathan in hour one. We closed all the pill mills. You're only going to be able to get your cannabis at a pill mill. A pill mill style pot shop. You mean a legal cannabis dispensary? No. 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 I'm talking about a pill mill style, evil, cape wearing, terrorist organization running pot store. You mean a legally operated cannabis dispensary? It's all in words, ladies and gentlemen. It's all how you word it, wordplay, word magic. The FDA has not approved it. Like that means anything. They say GMOs are perfectly fine, and so is aspartame. Any questions? Really, again, appeal to emotion, be afraid, and appeal to authority. When your whole argument, ladies and gentlemen, relies on logical fallacies, you don't have a real argument. They shouldn't require the use of appeal to emotion. Your kids, my God! The appeal to authority, I'm a doctor. Do you really need that in a valid argument? Do you need someone to go, well, I have this white coat on? When I first saw this commercial in the beginning, I felt like saying, and I stopped myself because I was going to pause it for a second. When she goes, I'm a doctor, I was going to pause it and be like, I'm not a doctor, but I did sleep at a Holiday Inn Express last night. I mean, really? Really? I'm a doctor. No, you're a paid actor. And this is my prescription pad. Well, thank you, Dr. Obvious. You won't need this. You're right. Technically, you're right. We won't need your prescription pad anymore because your prescription pad is only good for big pharma death. So I guess we won't be needing that anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to a debate, if you're listening to two sides to an argument like this, and one side is giving you facts and scientific data, and the other side presents you with logical fallacies and fear porn, it's not too hard to figure out who doesn't have a valid argument. Now, when they refuse to see the scientific data that's right in their faces, and their arguments are, well, it's not FDA approved. I mean, this is literally what the sheriffs have said before in the Florida Sheriff's Association. It's not FDA approved. So, you see this on the commercial too. It's not FDA approved. So, well, that means that, it's got no validity, blah, 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 blah. Again, appeal to emotion. So if you refuse to look at the evidence, there has to be another reason why you're against it. And everybody that's against it also has a monetary reason to be upset if cannabis becomes legalized, because they will start to lose money. I don't see anybody that stands to lose money running around going, yeah, legalize it, free people, make people not sick. No. And that is morally repugnant behavior. You people engaging in it are morally obtuse. If you don't know what that means, maybe you should go look it up. Do a little homework. I have no respect for somebody that specifically for greed is willing to make other human beings suffer needlessly. It's not about getting high, and we've proved that. In fact, I have audio for you here in the second hour, just in case you're still on the fence. But first, let's finish up the last 7 seconds of It's a Trick.
Regulated by the FDA. Amendment 2. There's nothing medical about this marijuana.
I'm sorry. It just makes me nauseous. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, the lies. Too much BS over the course of a brief period of time like that makes me nauseous. It just upsets my stomach. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm better now. So, really? This pot is evil. It is going to swallow your face and your child's face and your house and the neighborhood. It's going to eat your little dog, too. It's pot. Pot 2, the revenge. I mean, people, stop calling it pot. Don't call it marijuana. It's not either of them. It's called cannabis. If we start to hold ourselves accountable by calling it the proper name, that's the first step. We have to stop engaging in the word magic that they've got us engaging in. By us turning around and referring to things, like I have to catch myself sometimes. I still sometimes say PTSD. I'm the one that did shows about calling it PTS because it's not a disorder, right? And yet here I still once in a while catch myself saying PTS. So we have to police ourselves and stop using words like pot, marijuana, reefer. I know it might sound funny, and I say reefer madness in reference to their propaganda, but I don't refer to it as, do you like reefer or anything like that, for a reason. Because the more we focus on using the same words that they do, we're reinforcing it. We have to change the narrative. They're not going, fixing things doesn't entail us sitting back and waiting for them to stop calling it pot and start calling it cannabis. We have to do that. They didn't even have conversations about this 5-6 years ago. You would have been, if you thought 5 or 6 years ago, if you brought up in public that, wow, we might vote on legalizing medical cannabis in Florida, people would have thought you were insane down here. And look where we are. All because people finally opened their mouths and forced the proper conversation. And even though the other side brings logical fallacies by pointing this stuff out in a very calm manner, you can debunk their crap. And by the way, when they say debunking against us, they're using the term wrong. You can only debunk something that has bunk in it. Bunk meaning garbage, junk, lies. Right? So if you have scientific evidence to back everything up, and I mean real data, which the pro-cannabis department does, well, the anti-cannabis crowd is the one resorting to logical fallacies. So who doesn't have any real empirical data or facts? The no crowd. And again, resorting to logical fallacies and lies gets you nowhere, and it means that you really don't have any valid point to begin with. So, let me get to the audio. To start off with, I want to play a piece. And you can see all these on, most of the stuff you should be able to find them on YouTube. But the guy's name is David Bierman, or Behrman, however you pronounce it. He's an MD. Check out medicalmarijuana411.com, even though I hate that word. That's the people that did these interviews, and they put them up on YouTube. His name's David Behrman, Bearman, MD. Look that up on YouTube, and the video should pop up. You can watch it, pass it around, give it to whoever. But I'm going to play the audio from it. Now, the reason I'm going to play this is because here you have a medical doctor, and he's saying all the positive uses for the cannabis that he's discovered and he's become enlightened to. And he even admits that in the beginning he didn't really believe that it was, in the benefit of it, but because he was ignorant to its benefits. And I think that's important for other doctors to hear, because just like us, when we wake up, this might be the key for many doctors to wake up to the whole New World Order agenda and everything else. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, and I speak to the people that are quote-unquote awake, just because the people are still asleep doesn't... I know technically they're in the Matrix, and like Morpheus said, oh my God, they'll fight, and that makes them your enemy, but they're not really our enemy. We need to realize that we need to not be so combative with them. Try to understand that everybody is kind of asleep in the same way. It's just a different key to each door. So with that, doctors, if you're listening, let's listen to David Behrman.
Earlier you mentioned that maybe I was opposed to medical marijuana, and I said no, I was just dubious. And I certainly was dubious about the use of cannabis for treating ADD or ADHD, but that was because I didn't know anything. And when I looked into it, I found out that there were at least 40 papers written before 2000 dealing with the endocannabinoid system, cannabis, and ADD, ADHD, and that as early as 1998, efforts had been made in Oregon to add ADD, ADHD to the list of conditions for which cannabis was appropriate or legal in the state of Oregon. I began to have people mention that they were able to focus and concentrate more with cannabis. I had people tell me that their grades went from D's and F's to A's and B's when they started using marijuana in junior high school. I had one patient come in and tell me that they attributed their graduating from the Maritime Academy to smoking marijuana, and another person who said that they were able to get their PhD as a result of smoking marijuana. And I started looking into this and found that there were hundreds of research studies that had been done which provided some of the information as to why this might work. And the reason that it probably works is that cannabis is important in terms of retrograde inhibition. And retrograde inhibition is a way of modulating the speed of neurotransmission. It's normal. And what happens if you don't have enough cannabinoids is that your neurotransmission is too rapid. So if you have a rapid assault, if you will, on the cerebral cortex of a substantial number of ideas, concepts, sensory input, then it may be difficult for the cerebral cortex to focus or concentrate. But if you slow these down, these neural impulses down by a few nanoseconds, then you're going to give the cerebral cortex more of an opportunity to focus and concentrate, because you're going to have neural impulses moving more slowly, and you'll probably have fewer neural impulses. Now, there was an article that appeared in Scientific America in December 2004, written by Elger Nickel, and I had the good fortune to go to a conference and be able to chat with Elger about retrograde inhibition and about the way cannabis worked in terms of attention deficit disorder. And he told me that I was, more or less in the ballpark. After all, he's a researcher and I'm a clinician, so there's not always a perfect exchange of information between researchers and clinicians. But in this case, I feel as though I am close enough to having a good understanding. Furthermore, in addition to Elger, there is a researcher at UC Irvine named Daniel Piamelli. Piamelli has invented 6 or 7 substances that interfere with the body's own metabolism of its own cannabinoids. And he feels that by increasing the cannabinoids in the brain, that it's useful in treating panic attacks, attention deficit disorder, Tourette syndrome, and bipolar disorder. And I think much of the way in which cannabis works can be explained by the phenomenon of retrograde inhibition. And what's happening there is that the cannabis is causing more dopamine to be available. It is the dopamine that actually facilitates the retrograde inhibition. What cannabis does is it competes with dopamine for dopamine binding sites on dopamine transporter. And if you get enough cannabis, it fills up the binding sites on the dopamine transporter, or at least a lot of them. The dopamine can't get in. You now have more dopamine, you have more retrograde inhibition, you have slower speed of neurotransmission, and you have better ability to focus and concentrate. And I've been amazed. Back in, I think, 2001, I was interviewed for an article in USA Today, their online version on migraine headaches. And the reporter was talking to me, and as often happens, they were discussing their experiences when they were in college. And we were at this informal restaurant down near Zuma Beach. And after about 20 minutes of this, the waitress came over. And we'd been talking about migraines. And she said, my son, who's 20, when he was 17, he noticed that cannabis helped him focus and concentrate and do his homework, and his grades went from D's and C's to A's and B's. This was completely unsolicited. I also have people call me up and try to get me to see their teenagers. I have a rule, it's not ironclad, that I won't see patients under the age of 21. But in certain circumstances, I will see those patients. And in some of these instances, the parents have said that the change in their child in terms of their ability to focus, their ability to concentrate, their interaction with the parents, their interaction with siblings, the turnaround has been fantastic, and the benefits have been such that they really are insisting that somebody make a recommendation so that they'll be legal. And they want to avoid these places where doctors are practicing minimalist medicine and not spending a lot of time with the patients. Now, when I see somebody for attention deficit disorder, I often recommend to them the book Fidget to Focus, which is written by a local psychologist, Dr. Roland Rotz. And Rotz himself has ADD. He has a website on ADD. He does some courses through adult education, and of course he does one-on-one therapy. And he has been very good, according to some of my patients, in giving people with attention deficit disorder some very good strategies and techniques for how to successfully negotiate life with ADD. Because as you probably know, people who have ADD or ADHD are not very good at completing tasks, tend to overcommit themselves, often miss appointments. And so it's a question of being organized, of writing things down, and of setting up certain structure to your life so that you can rein in the ADD. Now, ADD is not necessarily a bad thing. There was an article in Newsweek a couple of years ago quoting a bunch of experts saying that people with ADD made good CEOs, they made good entrepreneurs, and they were very creative. And I've certainly found that to be generally the case amongst my population of patients who have ADD.
Now, I know I've talked about how ADD, like the doctor who discovered it, said it was fake on his deathbed. There is definitely something there there is something that makes, I myself have been diagnosed with ADHD since I was a kid, but I just call it my brain is in overdrive because I'm constantly thinking. But yes, I can attest to the fact that Ritalin and all that stuff made me a zombie. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s and discovered cannabis that, I didn't. First time I ever did it was in my 20s when I was younger. And I realized that it did have an effect. So if whatever it is, speedy brain, whatever, it does allow people to concentrate and help with other problems. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment of tonight's broadcast. So if you're a doctor or a parent, you have a child, instead of being afraid, buying into the fear porn, maybe your kid's on ADHD medication, can't concentrate, got bad grades in school, you just heard multiple accounts mentioned where parents knew that the child was using cannabis and it helped the grades, or that the person themselves said that they used it and it helped their grades. That's what spurred this guy to look into it, and then he realized that, wow, I was wrong about it. It's okay to be wrong, doctors. Dentists. I mentioned dentists because every time you mention fluoride, I'm around a dentist, unless they're my good buddy, Dr. Jason Pujo. He's the only dentist I know of, honestly, that has ever said that fluoride is bad. Well, I mean, besides, like, you know, some of the ones you see on some of the videos that I've played, but I mean, dentist I've ever met in person, I should say. Every other dentist I've ever talked about this with always, you know, well, you can find whatever you want on the internet. Oh, here we go. Blame it because you can go to the website. That's real intelligent, Doc. I'm urging all of you, medical professionals, here in Florida, remember your oath to do no harm. The evidence is out there. If you're not sure, you still have time to go educate yourself long before the vote. I suggest you do it. It helps with a multitude of illnesses. And that's one of the things, that's the reason why I'm going to play some evidence about other things really quick for you, but that's why I focused on the ADD thing first, because they always say, down here, one of the things they throw out there is it'll be diagnosed for anything, and they mention how, you know, ADD, you know, they'll be wanting to give it to kids for ADD, and here you have a doctor, a scientist. Well, he's an MD, but as he said, a clinician. He's actually out there. I consider them to be scientists to a certain degree because you have to have some level of, you know, science. Just like firefighters are actually scientists. Yeah, a lot of guys study fire science, which is actual science. That's what you study when you go to fire academy. Anyway, I digress. So, this medical doctor, MD, is telling all of you other doctors, hey, look, pay attention, do the research. It's there. Now, he's mentioning just about the ADD, and he said Tourette's and a few other things, but I wanted to start low first because that's always the aim of the anti-cannabis crowd. Well, they'll be giving it away for anything. Well, it does help with migraines and many other things, but look, there's a low-level thing. Now, how about we crank it up a notch? How about we go to, let's see, how about somebody with cerebral palsy? Let's see how she uses it. Let's see what she has to say about medical cannabis. Shall we?
I live in a state that has no medical marijuana protection. I was I'm born with cerebral palsy, which most noticeably manifests itself in a severe stutter, and the right side of my body is much noticeably weaker than my left. I have the stutter has got to be one of the most stigmatizing disabilities invented by God. It's very humiliating. My right arm is always very painfully tense. I went through my entire childhood in pain. because I couldn't move my muscles. The first time I realized that cannabis helped me was the first time I smoked it. It's been 3 days since I smoked. I am hoping to find something in Kansas City. I smoke to be the mother my children deserve, because they're really cool kids. I'm in downtown Kansas City, looking for cannabis.
Why?
Because I hate the way that I stutter, and it's the most effective treatment that I've found. If I were to get busted buying or smoking marijuana, there's a possibility that I could lose my children.
But it's worth that risk?
I wouldn't be half the mother I am without it, because I would just be in way too much pain. So yeah, being a good mother to my children is the most important thing in the world to me. After about the third hit is when I began to feel the tension dissipate. It really helps my speech. I feel much calmer, much less rushed, and I feel like I can control the muscles that I couldn't control before I smoked. It's kind of nice. I don't make as many funny faces.
3 hits you heard her take. And she went from stuttering, and if you could see the video, her arm is all crooked up. You can see this one too. It's on YouTube as well. Just look up medical marijuana - cerebral palsy, Jacqueline Patterson. Or cerebral palsy, I guess is how you actually pronounce it. Ugh. I pronounce it like I was from Jersey. Cerebral. Ugh. It's like we say radiator instead of radiator. Anyway. Look it up. This young lady has to put herself in a position where she could get in trouble just so she could be the proper mother to her children. The fact that politicians and bureaucrats do that to the very people of this country, and that there's people that celebrate it and cheer it, is disgusting. She took 3 hits, and you heard how it drastically changed the stutter. And if you saw the video, you could see how her body is all jammed up, and as she smokes, you could see her relaxing. It's got medicinal value, ladies and gentlemen. It's not going to make your kids or your grandkids turn into vampires or zombies and eat your face off. All that synthetic crap that's out there, because this stuff, the real stuff, is prohibited, will do that. Remember, prohibition with alcohol spawned all sorts of garbage drinks that were out there. And yes, there was actually the federal poisoning program where they actually poisoned the alcohol too. Nice program name, Federal Poisoning Program. Anyway, I got some more evidence for you. First, I got one more case where you'll hear someone else who used it medicinally, and then some more scientific evidence. So sit back and allow yourself to be enlightened a wee bit.
My name is Shauna Banda, and I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease about 9 years ago, and had every condition that you can think of. I've endured. I went through the beginning stages of the disease, where I was having strictures or blockages in my bowels, with surgeries and drugs to fix that, all the way to the terminal stages of the disease, where I was losing weight quite drastically, and my body was starving because any food that I ate was gone within minutes, and my body just wasn't able to absorb any of the nutrition that I was trying to give it. I was so sick for just so long that as soon as I tried the oil and started feeling way better, that there was no turning back. That was it. That was it. No medication that any doctor had ever given me had worked that well for any reason. I had watched Rick Simpson's movie, and I was in Kansas, and you need a whole pound of it to make the 2 ounces to cure you, and I cried. And I was like, there's no way. And I accidentally found out how to do it with a little $50 Gladstone vaporizer and a $5 spatula. Scrape that stuff out and scoop it into a pill and eat it 3 times a day. And it's just amazing. It really is. I really was on my deathbed, laying there in my bed, just waiting. Because, I was in and out of the hospital so much, and out of the emergency room, that the last couple of times I went in, there's nothing that we could do for you. And I'd gotten to the point where I didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to do anything, so I was just literally waiting to die. And that's when I accidentally found the oil. And really, within 3 days, I was able to no longer need the use of my cane. I could stand upright, and that was it. My life changed forever.
Does she sound like an addict? Does she sound like someone that supports pot shops and pot ducks just to get high? She was ready to give up on life, and it brought her back. But I'm sure there's no medicinal value, right? Some of the Florida sheriffs, I can't remember which one exactly. Well, I haven't seen really any evidence that blah, 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 there's any medicinal value to it. Right. This woman was on the verge of just giving up and saying, whatever, I lose the will to live, which is usually when people die. They lose the will to fight any longer. and it gave her strength to fight back. But I'm sure there's no medicinal value to it whatsoever. I'm sure it's just anecdotal evidence. Right? Only you hear these stories over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. How many times do you need to see people curing themselves anyway without your permission for you to finally say, you know what? I guess this is a pointless battle. You can tell people that there's no medicinal value because I say so or because the FDA says so and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't make it true. Next month, vote yes on 2, ladies and gentlemen. And look, I don't get paid by anybody to talk about this. I'm doing this because I'm tired of the stupidity and we need a step in the right direction. You want change? Positive change? Here's a step in the right direction. Anyway, here's a little bit of scientific proof, as I promised. There's a little bit more scientific proof for you scientists and doctors out there, again, who might still be on the fence. Here's a little bit scientific, little bit more for you. Check it out.
It's not really difficult to imagine how it happened. I mean, no one knows for sure when THC and the cannabinoid receptor first came together, but it has to have been here in these mountains. And whether it was an animal who, hungry, overcame the unpleasant taste and had a good munch on a cannabis bush, or it was a bird flying around or a rodent, the first stoned animal is lost to history. In that very first stoned animal, THC from the cannabis plant flowed from its gut into its bloodstream and was carried to its brain. There it met the cannabinoid receptor evolved so many millions of years earlier in the humble sea squirt. And it just so happened to fit, like a key in a lock. It was inevitable that eventually cannabis would meet its perfect partner. Us. Despite the global and enduring popularity of cannabis, modern science is only just beginning to comprehend its effects. Here, just outside Washington, D.C., scientists are trying, for the first time, to find the density and location of the cannabinoid receptors in the human brain. Conducting the research is Dr. Garth Terry. What stage are you at? What's happening?
We have our volunteer this morning. He's being put into the scanner. So first, though, we have to make sure his head's in the right position. So he has this white mask on his face.
What are you injecting him with?
We're injecting him with a radioactive drug. It works like a dye, and it targets only the cannabinoid receptors throughout the entire body. Right. And we're imaging the cannabinoid receptors in the brain. So this drug will accumulate in the brain, and we'll get a picture of where those cannabinoid receptors are and how dense they are throughout the entire brain.
By mapping out where cannabinoid receptors exist in the brain and in what density, it should help shed light on the role of the cannabinoid system, which scientists are only just beginning to understand. What would you say the function is of these endocannabinoid chemicals?
Well, they act like a dimmer switch for other neurotransmitters. So other neurotransmitters like dopamine, when they're released in large quantities, you need to have a way to turn down that signal, that sort of turn down the amount of neurotransmitter release.
Why do these other chemical messengers need regulating?
That's a good question. Well, if you have too much of a signal, it can actually be toxic to some brain cells. And so imagine the case of epilepsy. A lot of message is getting across, and it's not being regulated. It's all garbled. It's being sent all at once in full force.
In cases such as epilepsy, too much of a neurotransmitter is released, flooding through the brain and activating too many nerve cells. But when the cannabinoid receptors are activated, they cause the nerve cells to reduce the amount of neurotransmitter they release. In this way, the cannabinoid system keeps the brain stable, with levels of neurotransmitters at a happy medium. After 5 hours, the scan is complete. So Garth, you've got the results in?
Yes. So we finished our 5-hour scan, and let me show you what we have. So This is an image from our subject from today.
The receptors are highlighted in what color?
In bright red. Well, any color that you
right.
see, there are receptors.
Uh-huh.
And red is the really dense areas. And you can see there's a lot of red and yellow. Green and blue are the really not dense areas where there are not many receptors in our brain.
So they really are everywhere.
Yes, yes. Yeah. In fact, they're the densest receptors, one of the densest receptors in the brain, most populated throughout the entire brain.
And are they only in the brain, or are they in other parts of the body?
Well, I can show you an image of a whole body scan that we've done here. Here's one. So you can see, you can see it goes right into the brain. Look how hot that is.
Wow.
Right in the brain. But there's also cannabinoid receptors in the liver. Also, look at the bone marrow, the vertebral column, the ribs.
So how do you think what we're seeing here in this image, how does that relate to the experience of using cannabis?
Well, look at the amount of cannabinoid receptors in the brain. A lot of them. A lot of the effects of cannabis use are in the brain. Euphoria, as an anxiolytic, it dissolves your anxiety, or it can even cause your anxiety. So cannabis abusers or cannabis users talk about having this high, the euphoria. That's probably from some of the deep structures in the brain.
Garth's research shows that the cannabinoid system protects the brain by regulating the other neurotransmitters within it. And the fact that it's so widespread is reflected in the range of sensations it brings.
Wow. Cannabis can protect the brain? But I was told, Popeye, that cannabis destroys brain cells. I was told that cannabis it kills yeah, the programming is starting to break down. That's all, folks. That's what's happening to the programming. It's up on out. Starting to break down. And no, listening to my radio show for 2 hours isn't enough to say, well, I'm convinced. No, I challenge you to do the research yourself. First, you have to be willing to believe some of the things you see on the internet. I mean, it's amazing that you'll believe it if it's on the website from the FDA, but if it's on any other website, well, it could be fake. Why does the FDA have any credibility? Well, because they're the government, but that's an appeal to authority. It's a logical fallacy. So I ask you again, why is the FDA, who's been caught lying, aspartame? Enough said. How many of you know about that? Maybe you're not on the fence about that. You know aspartame's bad, right? They lied. They still lie to this day about it. So what makes you think they wouldn't lie about cannabis? Appeal to authority is a logical fallacy. The use of logical fallacies, or the reliance on thereof, means you have no real argument. And if that's the only thing that you have that's keeping you from checking into it, then maybe put that aside and do a little research. You might be surprised to find out that, wow, you're wrong. And there's nothing wrong with being wrong. Whether you're a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, a judge, a cop, a sheriff, whatever, federal agent. It's okay to be wrong. People respect you more if you're wrong and you admit to it and correct it than if you stick with being, wrong in your wrong opinion and fight just because you don't want to admit it because of ego. It's okay to be wrong. We're all human. Don't allow your ego to get in the way of your common sense and your logical thinking. I urge you, seriously, if you're a doctor, you're a law enforcement professional here in the state of Florida, do a little research. Cops, you're not always going to be a cop. When you're retired, maybe you get hurt or something, right? You got bad knees from 20 years being a cop and, walking a beat or whatever. You're going to want to have access to pain medication, just like anybody else that has, really bad knees or arthritis. You think they're going to give it to you just because you're a retired cop? No. They won't. But see, if you have the freedom to go to a cannabis clinic, well, go see a doctor and get a prescription, well, maybe your life could be a little better. Just saying.
This is Sparta!
With that, we're out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, come November 4th, vote yes on 2. As I always tell you, the solutions to our problems are an inside job. Be active, stay vigilant, get out there, tell your neighbor, your friends, your loved ones all about it. Cannabis could help them too. I love you all. I'll catch you all again next Tuesday. I'm out of here.